The rain came down hard over Brooklyn that night. It hit the kitchen window in sharp, uneven bursts, the kind of rain that didn't fall so much as it threw itself against the glass. The wind rattled the old wooden frame of the small house on Claremont Avenue, sending a thin draft creeping along the floorboards. Inside, the radio on the counter crackled softly, its voice fading in and out between the storm and the static. Authorities are still investigating the shooting near Pier 7 earlier this evening. 3 confirmed dead. Residents are urged to stay indoors. Martha Bennett sat in her armchair by the kitchen, knitting needles moving slowly in her hands. She didn't look up at the radio. She didn't need to. She had lived in Brooklyn long enough to know what those reports meant. 3 blocks away wasn't far. Not far at all. At the small wooden table near the stove, Annie sat with her crayons spread out in a quiet half-circle. Her tongue stuck out slightly between her teeth as she focused on her drawing a house with a yellow door, a girl in front of it, and a sun far too large for the sky above. She was 9 years old, but her hands moved with the patience of someone older. "Grandma," she said without looking up, "is the door yellow or red?" Martha smiled faintly. "Whichever one makes you feel safe, baby." Annie nodded, satisfied, and reached for the red crayon. Then the knock came. It was soft, almost too soft. 3 quiet taps, barely louder than the rain itself. If the radio had been any louder, neither of them would have heard it at all. Martha's hands stopped moving. Annie's head lifted. "Grandma, someone's at the door. At this hour?" Martha set her knitting aside slowly. The clock above the stove read 9:47 p.m. The street outside was dark, the kind of dark that swallowed even the street lamps when the rain got heavy enough. Another knock, weaker this time. Annie was already off her chair before Martha could stop her. "Annie, wait," but the little girl was halfway across the kitchen, her bare feet quick against the worn linoleum. The porch light cast a pale glow through the frosted glass of the front door, and through it, Annie could see the outline of someone small, smaller than her, a child, maybe, standing perfectly still, shoulders hunched against the storm. "Annie, come back here." Martha's voice was sharper now, the tone she used when something felt wrong, but Annie had already turned the lock. She pulled the door open slowly. Cold air rushed in first, carrying the smell of wet pavement and exhaust from somewhere far down the block. Then she saw him, a little boy, maybe 7. His dark coat was soaked through, the kind of coat that didn't belong on a child wandering the streets at night. Clean lines, expensive fabric, a small embroidered tag near the collar. His hair was plastered to his forehead. His lips were a faint shade of blue. He was holding a phone in one trembling hand, its screen dark and useless. He looked up at her. His eyes were wide, not crying, just frightened in the quiet way only children know how to be. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely making it past the wind. "I just need somewhere warm." "My phone died." Annie didn't move for a moment. She just looked at him. Then, slowly, she turned her head back toward the kitchen, toward her grandmother, who was already on her feet now, her face caught somewhere between caution and something older, something she hadn't worn in years. The rain kept falling. The boy stayed on the porch, waiting, and Annie's small hand stayed on the door. Martha moved before she even realized she had stood up. "Annie." Her voice was low, careful, the kind of careful that came from years of knowing exactly what could go wrong in a place like Brooklyn. "Step back from the door, baby." Slowly. Annie didn't move. She kept her small hand on the wood, eyes still on the boy. "Grandma, he's freezing." I said step back. Something in Martha's tone made Annie finally turn her head. Her grandmother was already crossing the kitchen, the knitting forgotten on the chair, her thin frame moving faster than usual. She didn't shut the door. She didn't open it wider either. She placed herself between Annie and the porch, one hand resting gently but firmly on her granddaughter's shoulder. The boy hadn't moved. He stood there with the rain dripping from the ends of his hair, his small fists clenched at his sides, as if he was afraid that taking even half a step closer might send the door shut in his face. Martha looked at him for a long moment. Then she lowered her voice so only Annie could hear. "Honey, listen to me. There have been 3 shootings this month within 4 blocks of this house. 3. She paused. "The radio's been talking about it all week. Moretti and Romano men killing each other in the street like dogs. Last Tuesday, a delivery driver caught a stray bullet just trying to get to his van." Annie's brow pulled together. "But he's just a little boy, Grandma. I know what he looks like. Then why are you scared?" Martha exhaled slowly. The wind pushed harder against the open door, and behind her the radio crackled out another fragment of the same broadcast, as if the night itself was trying to make her point for her. "Because sometimes," Martha said quietly, The people who do the worst things use the people you'd never suspect. A child knocks. Someone opens the door, and then someone else comes through behind him. Annie looked back at Oliver. He hadn't taken a single step. He was still standing right at the edge of the porch, half in and half out of the light, shivering so hard now that his shoulders shook with it. He wasn't trying to come closer. He wasn't trying to push his way in. He was just waiting, watching, hoping. His phone slipped slightly in his hand. He caught it without looking down. The way he held it told Annie everything she needed to know. Whoever he was supposed to call, he hadn't been able to reach them in a long time. "Grandma," Annie said softly. Martha didn't answer right away. "Grandma, look at him." Martha did look. She had been looking the whole time. She had spent 40 years as a nurse in this city. She had seen more children come through emergency room doors than she cared to count, some scared, some bleeding, some so quiet they didn't make a sound when the needle went in. She knew the difference between a child playing a part and a child who was just cold. But knowing wasn't the same as being sure. Not in Brooklyn. Not this year. "Grandma." Annie's voice was steady now. Small, but steady. "You said kindness is what makes us different from them." Martha turned her head slowly to look at her granddaughter. Annie didn't look away. "You said that. Last summer, when the man at the bus stop asked for change, and the other people walked past him. You said it's what makes us different." For a long moment, the only sound was the rain. Then Martha closed her eyes. She let out a breath that seemed to carry the weight of every cautious instinct she had built up over the years. When she opened her eyes again, there was something softer in them. Not relief, not yet. Just a quiet, tired surrender to something she had taught the child herself. She nodded once. "All right," she stepped aside. "Come in before you catch your death, child." Oliver hesitated only a second. Then he stepped through the doorway, and the cold wind followed him in. Martha closed the door behind him and turned the lock out of habit. The sound of the rain dulled almost at once, pushed back to the other side of the wood. "Stand right there a moment," she said. Her voice had shifted again. Not soft, exactly, but practical. The voice she used to use in hospital corridors, when there wasn't time for anything but doing the next right thing. She pulled a thick towel from the linen drawer near the sink and crossed back to him. Oliver stood very still as she draped it over his shoulders and rubbed his arms briskly through the cloth. He flinched once when her hand brushed near his ear, then steadied. "You're shaking," she said. "I'm sorry, ma'am." Martha paused. She didn't answer that. She just kept working the towel up and down his small arms until the worst of the chill seemed to leave him. "Sit," she said, nodding toward the table. "Annie, bring him the blanket from the couch." Annie was already moving. By the time Oliver was settled in the chair across from where Annie had been drawing, a folded blanket was around his shoulders and a bowl of chicken soup was steaming in front of him. Martha had pulled the pot off the back of the stove without even thinking about it. There had been soup on most nights of Annie's life. Tonight it would feed one more. "Careful," Martha said. "It's hot." Oliver picked up the spoon. His hand was still trembling slightly, but the grip was clean and careful. He brought the first spoonful to his mouth, blew on it gently, and then ate. "Thank you." "Ma'am," he said. He took another bite. "Thank you, ma'am." And another. Annie tilted her head, watching him. After the fourth "thank you, ma'am," she finally leaned forward on her elbows. "You don't have to say it every time." Oliver looked up, the spoon halfway to his mouth. "My dad says I should." "Every time?" "Yes." Annie thought about that. "What's your name?" "Oliver." "I'm Annie. This is my grandma." "She's Martha." Oliver gave a small, polite nod toward Martha, as if he had just been formally introduced at a dinner he didn't belong at. Martha caught it. She didn't say anything yet. "Do you go to school around here?" Annie asked. "No." "Where do you go?" Oliver hesitated. "A different school." "What grade?" "Second." "I'm in fourth." Annie pushed the crayons further away to make room for his bowl. "What do you like to do?" "Like, for fun." Oliver thought about it for a long moment, long enough that Annie started to wonder if he hadn't heard her. "I read sometimes," he said finally. "And there's a piano. But mostly I just wait." "Wait for what?" "For my dad to be done working." Annie frowned a little. "Does he work a lot?" "My dad travels a lot," Oliver said. "He has many people working for him." He said it the way a child repeats a sentence he has heard adults say without fully understanding it. Then he went back to his soup. Across the room, the phone he had set on the counter near the outlet finally caught a charge. The black screen flickered to life with a soft chime. Annie glanced over without thinking. Then she looked again. "Grandma," she said quietly. Martha was already looking. The lock screen was crowded with notifications, dozens of them, stacked one on top of the other, all from a single contact. Papa. 27 missed calls. The most recent had come in less than a minute ago. Martha set the dish towel down slowly on the counter. She turned and really looked at the boy now. Not at the cold, or the wet hair, or the bowl of soup. At the rest of him. The coat hanging on the back of the chair was hand-stitched at the seams, the kind of stitching that didn't come from any store on this street. His shoes, beneath the table, were leather, clean leather, except for the rain. He sat with his back perfectly straight, the way children only sat when someone had taught them to. The way he held his spoon 3 fingers, thumb tucked. No scraping the bowl was the kind of table manner most adults Martha knew never quite got right. He was 7 years old, maybe younger, and every small thing about him said he had been raised by someone with a great deal of money and a great deal of rules. Martha didn't move from the counter. She let her eyes rest on him for a moment longer. Something wasn't right. She just didn't know yet how wrong it was going to get. Martha walked back to the table slowly, the way a person walks when they don't want to be seen walking. "Eat some bread with that, child," she said. "It'll warm you up faster than the broth." She slid the small basket of dinner rolls across the table. Oliver reached out for one with his right hand. The sleeve of his sweater pulled back as he stretched, and Martha stopped breathing. Just for a second, just long enough that Annie, who was still leaning on her elbows watching the boy, didn't notice. But Martha noticed. Martha saw everything in that 1 second. On Oliver's thin wrist sat a silver bracelet. A child's bracelet, size small, but heavy. Real silver, by the way it caught the light. The chain was thick and braided in a pattern Martha had seen before, and in the center of it, set into a flat oval plate against his skin, was a single engraved symbol, a black panther, crouched low, its body curled around a single capital letter, M. The kitchen seemed to shrink around her. For a moment, Martha wasn't standing in her own house. She was 23 years old again, in the emergency wing of Brooklyn Methodist, working the overnight shift. There was a man on the gurney in front of her, half his shoulder gone, blood soaking through every sheet they put under him. His shirt had been cut away. On his chest, just above the heart, the same panther curled around the same letter. The doctors had worked on him for 40 minutes. He hadn't made it. 2 nights later, 3 more bodies came through wearing the same mark, only theirs had been put through windshields first. She had asked an older nurse what the symbol meant. The nurse had told her never to ask again. That had been almost 40 years ago. The panther had not gone away. It had only grown larger and quieter, until the city stopped saying the name out loud unless it had to. Moretti. Oliver was lifting the bread to his mouth, completely unaware. The bracelet caught the light again as he chewed. Martha pulled her gaze away from his wrist, slowly, smoothly. She picked up the dish towel she had set down minutes ago and folded it once, then again, then a third time, just to give her hands something to do. She glanced toward the window. The street outside was still dark. The rain was still coming down. Through the wet glass, she could just make out the faint glow of the porch light reflecting on the puddles by the curb. No movement, no headlights, no shadows. Not yet. Her heart was beating too hard against her ribs. She forced it to slow. A boy wearing that mark did not get lost in this neighborhood by accident. A boy wearing that mark did not show up at a stranger's door alone. Either he was running from something, or someone was looking for him. Probably both. And whoever was looking for him would find this house. Grandma? Annie's voice was quiet, careful in a way that a 9-year-old shouldn't have to be. She was watching her grandmother's face. "Grandma, are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby." Martha forced a small smile. It didn't sit right on her face, and Annie saw that too, but neither of them said so. Martha set the towel down and walked around behind Annie's chair. She bent low, as if to kiss the top of her granddaughter's head, and brought her mouth right next to her ear. "Annie," she whispered. Her voice was thin and steady. "I want you to go to your room, right now. Don't run. Don't ask questions. Just go." Annie turned her head slightly. "Why go? Please." Annie hesitated. Her eyes flicked once toward Oliver, then back up at her grandmother. She started to slide off her chair. She didn't make it. A sound rose outside, low and steady, cutting through the rain. The sound of engines, more than one, moving slowly down a street that, at this hour, should have been empty. Martha's hand closed tight around the back of Annie's chair. It was already too late. The engines grew louder, not the sharp whine of a single car turning down the block. This was something deeper, heavier, several engines moving in formation, the kind of low, controlled rumble that didn't belong on a residential street at almost 10 at night. Martha had heard that sound only a few times in her life. Each time, it had meant something terrible was about to happen on someone else's doorstep. Tonight, it was hers. She straightened up from behind Annie's chair. Her hand stayed on her granddaughter's shoulder. "Annie. Grandma, what? Don't talk. Just stay close." Headlights swept across the front window. The thin curtains lit up white for a moment, then dimmed as the vehicles rolled past. Then another pair of lights. And another. Martha could see the shapes through the glass now, large, square, black. They were moving slow, the way people moved slow when they were looking for something. The first SUV stopped directly in front of the house. Then a second pulled up behind it. Then a third, until the street was lined with them. Two more swung wide around the corner at the far end of the block, parking nose to tail across the intersection. 5 vehicles in total. They had cut off the street from both directions. The engines kept running. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, almost at the same instant, the doors began to open. Men stepped out. Not loud, not rushed. Each one moved with the same quiet economy of motion, as if they had done this 100 times before. Dark coats, dark gloves. A few of them carried something at their sides that they didn't try to hide. They didn't speak to one another. They didn't need to. 2 went to the corners of the block. 2 more took positions in front of the neighboring houses. The rest faced Martha's door. Behind her, Oliver pushed his chair back from the table. "It's my dad," he said. His voice was small, but lit with relief. "He found me." He stood up. The blanket slipped from his shoulders to the floor. "Don't move," Martha said sharply. Oliver froze. Annie was clutching the back of her grandmother's sweater now, eyes huge. "Grandma, get behind me. All the way behind me." A single set of footsteps came up the porch stairs. They were unhurried, even, the kind of steps a man took when he already knew the door was going to open for him. Then the knock came. It was nothing like Oliver's. There was no hesitation in it. 3 firm, evenly spaced strikes against the wood, loud enough to settle through the whole house. It wasn't a request. It was an announcement. Martha drew Annie behind her with one hand. With the other, she reached for the deadbolt. Her fingers were trembling. She steadied them on the metal. "Stay back," she whispered. To Annie, to Oliver, to herself. She turned the lock. She turned the handle. She opened the door. The man on the other side did not step inside. He did not have to. He stood there at full height in the doorway, and the small frame of the door seemed barely able to hold the shape of him. He was tall, broad through the shoulders. A long black coat fell almost to his knees, untouched by the rain, as though even the weather had been instructed to keep its distance. His face was clean-shaven, sharp at the jaw, lined faintly around the eyes by something other than age. His hair was dark, combed back, streaked at the temples with the first gray of a man who had lived hard. But it was the eyes that froze Martha where she stood. They were not angry. They were not afraid. They were the eyes of a man who had already decided how this night was going to end, and was only here to make sure everyone else caught up. He looked past her. He saw his son. And only then, very slowly, did Luca Moretti speak. Oliver. The name hung in the air. For several seconds, Luca Moretti did not move. He did not step into the house. He did not look at Martha. He did not look at Annie clinging to the back of her grandmother's sweater. His eyes had locked onto the small figure standing behind the kitchen table, and nothing else in the world existed. Oliver took one careful step forward. Then he ran. "Papa." The boy crossed the kitchen in 3 quick strides. The blanket forgotten on the floor behind him. Luca dropped to one knee inside the doorway before Oliver had even reached him, his coat falling open around them both. Oliver crashed into his chest with the small, uncoordinated force of a child who had been holding himself together for too long, and only now had somewhere safe enough to fall apart. Luca's arms closed around him. For a moment, the man who had filled the entire doorway with quiet menace was gone. In his place was something else. A father whose hands gripped the back of his son's coat too tightly. A father who pressed his cheek against the top of the boy's wet hair and held him there as if afraid the night would try to take him again. "You scared me." His voice was rough, not loud, not theatrical, just cracked at the edges in a way that no part of his appearance had prepared anyone to hear. "Don't you ever do that again. I'm sorry, Papa. I'm sorry. I know. He held the boy a few seconds longer. Then he eased back, just enough to look at his son's face. He brushed wet hair off Oliver's forehead with the side of his thumb. His eyes moved over the boy quickly, the way Martha had seen mothers check children in the ER, looking for anything that wasn't there a few hours ago. There was nothing. Oliver was whole. Cold, tired, but whole. Luca closed his eyes for one short breath. Then he opened them, and the father was already folding back into the man. He stood up slowly. He did not let go of Oliver's hand. He turned, and the weight of his attention settled on Martha for the first time. The look was different now. It was not the look he had given the doorway. It was something quieter. He took in her face, her plain sweater, the trembling hand still resting on the deadbolt. He looked past her at the small girl half hidden behind her, then back to Martha herself. "Ma'am," he said. His voice had steadied. "My name is Luca Moretti. I believe you know what that name means." Martha did not flinch. "I know enough." He inclined his head very slightly, as though that was the answer he had expected, and respected her for giving it. He stepped fully into the kitchen now, but only one step. The men outside stayed outside. "My son told me on the phone that a woman and a little girl took him in, fed him." His eyes flicked once to the bowl on the table, still warm, charged his phone. Did not ask him questions he could not answer. "He was cold," Martha said. "He was, yes." Luca reached into the inside of his coat. Martha tensed. So did Annie behind her. He noticed both, and slowed his hand deliberately. What he drew out was not a weapon. It was an envelope. Thick, bound with a simple band. He set it on the kitchen table, beside Oliver's bowl, without ceremony. "For your kindness." Martha looked at the envelope. She looked at him. No, Luca did not move to take it back. He did not look surprised either. "Ma'am, I said no, Mr. Moretti." Her voice was quiet, but there was iron under it now. "We didn't help him for money. We helped him because he was a child standing in the rain." For the first time, something in Luca's expression shifted. Just slightly. The corner of his mouth, the line of his shoulders, not a smile, closer to recognition. He opened his mouth to answer her. He never got the chance. The front window of the kitchen exploded. Glass burst inward in a sharp white spray. A line punched through the wall just above Martha's head, throwing splinters of plaster across the table. The radio on the counter went silent mid-broadcast as a second round tore through its casing. Somewhere in the street, the first gunshot finally caught up to the bullet that had already arrived. Luca was moving before the sound had finished. He had Oliver on the floor before the second shot landed. One arm swept the boy down behind the cover of the kitchen counter, pinning him flat against the linoleum. The other was already reaching out toward Martha and Annie, who were still standing frozen by the open door. "Down!" His voice was not the quiet voice from a minute ago. It was the voice of a man giving an order that did not allow disobedience. Martha grabbed Annie by the waist and dropped. Luca caught them both halfway, his free arm wrapping around them as he pulled them behind the kitchen island. Glass crunched under his knees. He didn't seem to feel it. A burst of automatic fire stitched a line across the front of the house. The wall above the sink tore open. Cabinets splintered. A coffee mug exploded into white shards across the counter. Somewhere in the living room, a framed photograph fell. Outside, a man's voice came sharp through the rain close, just beyond the porch. "Boss! Romano's men! 6 o'clock! 6 o'clock corner of Lafayette! Marco Bianchi." Even from inside, Martha could hear the shape of him through that shout, older, controlled, no panic in the words even with bullets in the air. Luca answered without lifting his head. "Civilians inside! Hold the line!" Then he turned to the two of them on the floor. He had positioned his body between the broken window and the three of them. His back was to the street. Anything that came through that window would have to go through him first. Oliver was tucked under one of his arms, face pressed into his father's chest, fists clenched in the lapel of the long black coat. Annie was crushed against her grandmother on the other side, half under Martha's body, her small shoulders shaking with sobs she was trying not to let out. "Listen to me." Luca's face was very close to Martha's now. His voice had dropped, quiet under the noise, but every word landed clean. "Stay low. Don't lift your head. I'm going to get you out of this house." Martha nodded once. She didn't trust her voice. She tightened her arms around Annie instead. Grandma Annie's voice was tiny, muffled against her sweater. "I've got you, baby. I've got you." Another burst of gunfire hammered the front of the house. The remaining glass in the front window blew apart. Wood snapped somewhere in the porch frame. Outside, Luca's men had finally returned fire. Martha could hear the difference between the two now. The sharp, controlled bark of return shots from the SUVs answering the wilder, longer chatter coming from across the street. A man screamed somewhere down the block. She couldn't tell whose. Oliver whimpered. Luca's hand pressed against the back of his son's head, holding him steady. He didn't shush him. He didn't tell him it was going to be okay. He just kept him there, anchored, breathing. Then his eyes lifted to the window. Martha saw it before he did, a small dark shape, end over end, arcing through what was left of the broken glass. For half a second, she thought it was a brick. It wasn't a brick. Bottle, she started. The glass jar hit the wall above the kitchen table and shattered. A wash of liquid sprayed across the wallpaper, across the curtain, across the leg of the table. The wick caught the moment it left the air. Fire bloomed up the wall in a single roaring breath, climbing the curtain so fast that the entire window frame was alight before anyone could draw the next one. The smell of gasoline filled the kitchen. Annie screamed. Luca did not. The fire moved faster than anything else in the room. It ran up the curtain in a single sheet, jumped to the wooden window frame, and then dropped down onto the table where it found the spilled gasoline waiting. The flames spread outward in a low, hungry circle, blackening the wallpaper Martha had hung herself 30 years ago. Smoke began to push against the ceiling, looking for somewhere to go. Luca's head snapped toward the back of the house. Back door! His voice cut through the noise. Now, move! He pushed up onto one knee, his coat sweeping around him. With one arm, he lifted Oliver clean off the floor and tucked him against his side. With the other, he reached for Martha. Up, with me. Stay behind my shoulder. Martha didn't argue. She scrambled to her feet, dragging Annie up with her. The heat from the wall was already pressing against her face. The smoke caught the back of her throat as she breathed. Marco, Luca shouted toward the front. We're going out the rear. On you, boss. The front door slammed open. Marco came through it low and fast, a heavy pistol up in one hand, a flashlight clipped to his belt. He didn't even look at the fire. His eyes found Luca, then the children, then locked forward toward the hallway that led to the back of the house. 2 more men followed him, and both broad, both armed, both with the same quiet discipline as the ones still firing out on the street. Hallways clear to the kitchen rear, yards open, vehicle inbound to the alley right now. Go. Marco went. The 2 guards folded in around Annie and Martha, one on each side, broad shoulders forming a moving wall of dark coats around the small girl. Luca brought up the rear with Oliver pressed against his chest, his free hand already drawing a weapon Martha had not seen until now. They moved. Annie's bare feet slapped against the floorboards as her grandmother pulled her down the narrow hallway. The radio was gone. The clock above the stove was gone. The smell of soup was gone. There was only smoke and the sharp chemical scent of burning gasoline, and the rolling crackle of fire eating its way through the kitchen behind them. At the doorway to the back hall, Annie's head turned, almost without her telling it to. She looked back. The kitchen table was on fire. The chair where Oliver had been sitting was on fire. On the seat of the chair opposite, where Annie had left it earlier in the evening, her old stuffed bear sat in its usual spot, and even as she watched, the flames climbed up its little legs and swallowed it whole. A small sound caught in her throat. Don't look back, baby. Martha's hand cupped the side of her face and turned her forward again. Don't look back. Just run. They ran. The back door was already open. Cold rain rushed in to meet the smoke. Marco was through first, sweeping the small yard with his weapon, the flashlight cutting white lines across the chain-link fence and the wet grass. The narrow gate at the end of the yard hung open. Beyond it, in the alley, a heavy black SUV sat idling, its rear door already swung wide. A driver inside, 2 more men outside, weapons up, watching the rooftops. Clear left. Move, move, move. Annie was lifted half off her feet by the guard on her right. Martha stumbled after her, one hand still clutched in her granddaughter's. They crossed the yard in a tight, hunched run, the rain hammering down on their heads, the orange light of the burning house growing brighter on the wet bricks of the alley wall. A shot cracked from somewhere above them. The guard on Martha's left grunted once, very softly, almost surprised. His knees folded under him. He went down face first into the wet pavement and did not get up. Push! Luca's voice was right behind her. Push! His hand was on her back now, half carrying her the last few steps. He swept Oliver into the open rear door of the SUV with a single motion, then turned and lifted Annie in after him as if she weighed nothing. Martha climbed in after her granddaughter on her own, hands and knees, the leather seat cold against her palms. Luca slid in last and pulled the heavy door shut behind him. Drive. The SUV lurched forward before the word had finished. Tires bit into wet asphalt. The alley smeared past the windows in dark streaks of brick and rain. Annie pressed her face into her grandmother's shoulder. She did not look back this time. Behind them, through the rear window, the small house on Claremont Avenue glowed orange against the Brooklyn night. Fire pouring out of every window now, rising into the rain like something that could not be put out. No one spoke for a long time. The SUV cut through the wet streets of Brooklyn at a speed that did not feel reckless from the inside, only inevitable. The driver moved through intersections without slowing, taking each turn with a smooth, practiced economy. Somewhere ahead of them, and somewhere behind, other vehicles ran the same route. Martha could see their taillights flickering through the rain, never closer than half a block, never farther than 2. Inside the cabin, the only sounds were the windshield wipers and the soft, uneven breathing of 2 children. Annie sat in the middle of the back seat. Her grandmother was on her right. Oliver was on her left. Annie was not crying anymore, but she was not all right either. Her hand had found Martha's somewhere between the alley and the highway, and she had not let go since. Her grip kept tightening every time the SUV passed under a street light, as if she half expected the light to be a muzzle flash. Martha didn't try to pull her hand free. She let the little girl hold on as tight as she needed to. Across the seat, Luca had taken off his coat and laid it across his son's lap. He had pulled a small folded handkerchief from his shirt pocket and was working it gently across Oliver's forehead. There was a thin line of blood there, just above the boy's eyebrow, where a piece of glass had caught him at some point in the kitchen. Oliver hadn't even noticed it until his father pointed it out. He sat very still now, eyes half closed, his small hand resting in Luca's other hand. The man cleaned the cut carefully. Once, twice. Then he folded the handkerchief over and pressed it to the spot, holding it there. Martha watched him do it. It was, she realized, exactly the way she used to clean Annie's scraped knees. Luca lifted his eyes once and met hers across the cabin. He did not look away. Neither did she. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and drew out a phone. He thumbed it twice without looking. A line connected almost at once. "It's me." His voice had returned to that low, controlled register. The street had not heard it. The kitchen had not heard it. This was the voice he used for the people who worked for him. Secure the safe house. Code black. Civilians inbound 3. 1 adult, 2 minors. ETA, 12 minutes. I want the medical team on site before we arrive. No exceptions. He listened. That's correct. The boy is with me. He listened again. Then find them. I want a name by morning. He ended the call. He slid the phone back into his pocket. He did not look at it again. For another minute, the cabin was quiet. Then he spoke without turning his head. Mrs. Bennett. Martha was almost surprised he had her name. Then she remembered Marco had heard Annie say it. I'm sorry. She didn't answer right away. They followed me to your door. His eyes were on Oliver. On the cut he was still pressing closed. I didn't see the tail. I should have. This is my fault. Martha looked out the window. Brooklyn was sliding past in the dark closed delis. A laundromat with its lights still on. A woman pulling a dog under an awning. Other people's ordinary night. My house, she said finally. Her voice was rough. 60 years of memories in that house. My husband built the back porch with his own hands. My daughter took her first steps in that kitchen. She swallowed. Gone. In 10 minutes. Luca did not look away from his son. I know. Do you? I know what it is to lose a home. She looked at him then. She did not ask. Annie's small voice came up between them. Grandma. Yes, baby. Are we going to die? The question was so small and so calm that for a moment Martha could not answer it. Annie wasn't crying when she asked. She was just asking, the way a child asks if it's going to rain tomorrow. Across the seat, Luca turned his head fully now. He looked at Annie, the handkerchief stilled in his hand. No, his voice had changed again. Not the boss, not the man at the door. Something steadier than both. No, sweetheart, not tonight. Not while I am breathing. I promise you that. Annie studied his face the way only children can, without flinching, without performing belief. Whatever she saw there, she accepted. She gave one small nod and leaned back against her grandmother's arm. The SUV slowed. It turned off the avenue onto a narrow service road Martha had never noticed before. Trees closed in on both sides, taller than they should have been for the middle of the city. Ahead, 2 heavy iron gates began to draw apart in silence, and the headlights washed across a long, dark driveway curving up into the trees. The SUV rolled through. The gates closed behind them. The driveway was longer than Martha expected. The SUV climbed gently for almost a full minute before the trees finally opened and the house revealed itself. It was a large stone-faced building set back against a wall of dark cypresses, 3 stories tall, with shuttered windows along the front and a wide covered entrance that no passing eye from the street would ever have known existed. Floodlights came on the moment the vehicle approached. 2 men stood at the foot of the stairs, hands folded in front of them. Another was visible on the upper balcony. Martha did not see any of them move, but she could feel them watching every door of the car as it stopped. You're safe here, Luca said quietly, I know it doesn't feel that way yet. He stepped out first. Marco opened the rear door from the outside. The rain had eased to a soft drizzle. A woman in a dark coat was already coming down the steps with a folded blanket over one arm. Inside, the house was warm. That was the first thing Martha noticed. Not the marble in the entry hall, not the height of the ceiling, not the long staircase curving up into the soft gold light of an upper floor. The warmth, after Brooklyn's cold rain and the cold leather of the SUV, the air in this house felt like it had been waiting for them. They were led into a sitting room that was easily 3 times the size of Martha's entire ground floor. A real fire burned in a stone fireplace at the far end. 2 long couches faced each other across a low table. The curtains were heavy, drawn, and very still. Whatever was happening outside this room was not allowed to come in. The contrast settled in Martha's chest like a stone. An hour ago, she had been knitting in a kitchen that no longer existed. Now she was standing on a rug that probably cost more than her late husband had earned in a year. A man came in with a leather bag, older, gray-haired, calm in the way doctors had to be in places like this. He went to Oliver first. He cleaned the small cut on the boy's forehead properly this time, closed it with a butterfly bandage, listened to his lungs, asked him in a quiet voice if anything hurt. Oliver answered every question politely. Then the doctor turned his attention to Annie. He checked her over gently. A small bruise on one knee from the alley, a faint scrape on her elbow. Nothing more. He looked up at Martha next. Mrs. Bennett, may I? I'm fine. Ma'am, with respect, I'm fine, Martha said again. Her voice was steady. I was a nurse for 40 years in this city. I know what I look like. I've seen worse. I've done worse. Take care of the children. The doctor held her eyes for a moment, then gave a small, respectful nod and stepped back. Luca had disappeared briefly. He came back carrying a tray himself, which Martha had not expected. On it were 2 cups, a small pot, sugar, milk. He set it down on the low table between the couches and poured 1 cup carefully before offering it to her. Tea, he said. It's the only thing I know how to make in this house without help. Martha looked at him for a long moment. Then she took the cup. Sit, Mr. Moretti. He sat across from her. Annie had curled into Martha's side. Oliver was being walked out of the room by a kind-faced housekeeper, with the promise of dry clothes and warm milk. Tell me what we are in the middle of, Martha said. Luca did not insult her by pretending not to understand. 2 families, he said. Mine and another, Romano. It has been a quiet war for many years. In the last 6 months it has stopped being quiet. Tonight was not the first attempt on my life this month. It is, however, the first one that found me at a stranger's door, and the men in the street outside my house, Romanos. They followed my son. I do not yet know how they knew where he was. I will, by sunrise. Martha turned the cup once in her hands. Mr. Moretti, Luca, Mr. Moretti. She lifted her eyes to him. Why was your son alone on the street tonight? Luca did not answer. He did not look away either. He simply sat there, very still, and let the silence hold what the words would not. His jaw tightened once. That was all. Of every wound the night had given him, Martha understood. This was the one he could not yet bring himself to clean. A small voice broke the quiet. Annie? Oliver was standing in the doorway in fresh pajamas, his hair damp and brushed back, a small bandage neat above his eyebrow. He looked very young and very hopeful. Annie, he said again, softly, do you want to see my room? Annie looked up at her grandmother. Martha hesitated only a moment, then gave a small nod. Go on, baby. I'll be right here. Annie slid off the couch. Her bare feet sank into the thick rug. Someone had brought her a pair of dry socks at some point, and a sweater that was too big in the sleeves but warm. She crossed the room slowly, almost shyly, and took Oliver's offered hand at the doorway. He led her out into the hall. It was wider than any hallway Annie had ever walked through in her life. The floor was a dark, polished stone, cool even through the socks. Tall paintings lined both walls, old paintings, with thick gold frames, of men on horses, of women in long dresses, of landscapes she did not recognize. There were small tables between the doorways, and on each one stood something that looked like it belonged in a museum. A bronze statue of a horse, a glass bowl filled with strange, smooth stones, a clock that ticked very quietly and very evenly, as though even time in this house had been trained to behave. Annie did not say anything. She just looked. It's a lot, Oliver said. It was not an apology. It was the simple voice of a child who already knew that other children would find his home strange. It's like a museum, Annie said. My grandmother decorated it. I never met her. He stopped at a door near the end of the hall and pushed it open. His room was enormous. Annie had imagined many things on the walk down the hallway. She had not imagined this. The ceiling rose almost to the second floor. One whole wall was a window, curtained now, but tall enough that Annie could not have touched the top of it even on Martha's shoulders. There was a bed shaped like a small ship in the corner, a reading nook with a real chandelier, a desk built into the wall, and on every shelf, on every surface, there were toys, boxes, and boxes of them, a model train set still wrapped in plastic, a wooden castle with all its little knights lined up in formation, untouched, a row of action figures still inside their original packaging, a telescope on a tripod that had clearly never been pointed at the sky. Annie stood very still in the doorway. "You have all this?" she said slowly. "And you ran away?" Oliver looked down at his slippers. Papa was in a meeting. His voice was very small. "For 3 days. People came and went, and they talked very loud, and they ate dinner at our table, and nobody said my name. And he swallowed. I just wanted to see the city. I wanted someone to talk to. I didn't mean to go that far." He sat down on the floor in the middle of the room. After a moment, Annie sat down across from him. The rug under her was so soft it felt like sitting on a cloud. "My house was small," she said. "I know. I saw. The kitchen had this little radio that only worked sometimes, and my chair at the table had a wobble in one leg, so Grandma put a piece of folded cardboard under it. And my room had a window that opened onto the alley, and in the summer I could hear the man on the 3rd floor playing his trumpet, even though he was bad at it." She paused. "And now it's all gone." Oliver didn't speak. He didn't try to fix it. He just sat with her in it. Then, slowly, he got up and walked to one of the shelves. He reached up, he had to stretch, and lifted down a small brown bear. Its fur was perfect. Its tag was still attached. He came back and held it out to her with both hands. "You can have him." Annie shook her head. "Oliver, no. He's yours. He's never been mine," Oliver said. "I've had him 3 years. I never even took the tag off. He just sits up there. You should keep him." Oliver looked down at the bear in his hands, then up at her again. "Things don't matter," he said quietly, "when no one shares them." Annie's eyes filled. Just a little, just enough that she had to blink hard. And then, for the first time since a small boy had knocked on her door, she smiled. Luca had been standing in the hallway for a while. He had not meant to. He had walked his son down the corridor, pointed out the room, said goodnight more carefully than usual, and then stepped back into the hall to give the children a moment. Just a moment. He had told himself he was going to walk back to the sitting room. He had not walked anywhere. His shoulder was against the wall now, half a step from the doorway, just out of the line of sight from inside. He could hear them. Annie's small voice describing the wobble in a kitchen chair. Oliver's quieter voice, careful, listening, then a stretch of silence. Then his son's voice again, softer than Luca had heard it in a long time, saying something about a brown bear and a tag. Then Annie's laugh. It was a small laugh, half a breath, surprised by itself. Luca closed his eyes. He did not remember the last time he had heard his son cause a laugh like that. Not receive one, cause one. "You're missing it." Martha's voice came from behind him, low. Standing out here. He did not turn at first. He did not have to. He knew she had been watching him from the end of the hall for at least a minute. He had heard her step soften when she saw him. "I didn't want to interrupt," he said. "That's not why you're standing here." He turned his head slowly and looked at her. She had her arms folded loosely. There was no judgment in her face. There was only the steady, plain attention of a woman who had spent 40 years watching people fail to say what they needed to say. He stepped away from the doorway. Together they walked a few paces down the hall, until the sound of the children's voices became something soft and shapeless behind them. For a moment neither of them spoke. "His mother," Luca said finally. 4 years ago. A car. It was a Tuesday morning. Oliver was 3. Martha did not say, "I'm sorry." She had never believed those words helped anyone. She just nodded once, slowly, so he would know she had heard him. "After that," Luca said, "I built walls. Around the house. Around him. Around the whole life. I put men at every gate. I made sure nothing could touch him. I made sure he had every book, every tutor, everything a child could be given. I told myself that was love, that if I built it tall enough, he would be safe inside it." He looked down the hall, toward the room with the laughter in it, and tonight he climbed out of all of it, to stand in the rain. At a stranger's door, Martha was quiet a moment. Then she said, "My daughter died 5 years ago." Luca turned his head. "Mother of that little girl in there. I won't tell you what took her. It was the kind of thing that takes a long time and you watch it the whole way down. By the time she was gone, Annie was 4. There wasn't anyone else. She gave a small, tired half smile. So now there's me, 68 years old, raising a 9-year-old. I didn't choose it. The Lord just handed her to me and walked off. And you opened your door tonight anyway. I almost didn't. Her voice was honest. I almost shut it. Annie's the one who opened it. Luca looked at her for a long moment. I built an empire, he said, so my son would never want for anything. And tonight he ran away to find a stranger's kitchen. Martha let that sit between them before she answered. Mr. Moretti. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of every shift she had ever stood through in an emergency wing. Children don't need empires. They need someone who shows up. Luca did not look at her when she said it. He looked at the floor. After a long moment, he gave a single, small nod. He did not trust himself to say anything else. His phone vibrated against his chest. He took it out, looked at the screen. Something in his face shifted, locked back into the shape Martha had first seen at her front door. "Excuse me, Mrs. Bennett." He raised the phone to his ear and walked a few paces further down the hall. "Tell me." He listened. His free hand closed slowly into a fist at his side. "Where?" he said. "Where?" He listened again. Then, quieter, more dangerous than anything else he had said all night. "Then we know what he's planning." Across the river, in a basement room beneath a closed jazz club in Astoria, the night was just beginning. The club above was dark, chairs stacked on tables, door locked from the inside. But beneath it, behind a steel door at the bottom of a narrow staircase, a small, low-ceilinged room glowed with the cold light of green-shaded lamps. The air smelled of old cigar smoke and stronger coffee. 3 men sat at a round table. One stood by the wall, holding a leather folder in both hands. None of them looked comfortable. At the head of the table sat Vincenzo Romano. He was 52 years old, lean, narrow-shouldered, with gray hair cut very short, and a face that had not held a smile in so long that the muscles had forgotten the shape. His suit was dark and perfectly pressed. His hands were folded neatly on the wood. He had been listening to the report for almost 10 minutes without saying a single word, and every man in the room could feel the silence growing colder by the second. The man with the folder finished speaking. He swallowed. "The ambush failed, sir. Moretti was inside the house when our men arrived. He came out the back. How many of mine? 2 confirmed dead, sir. 1 wounded. And his. At least one of his went down in the alley. We weren't able to confirm beyond that. The fire was already spreading. We had to pull back before the units arrived. The house, burning when we left. We don't believe anyone was still inside." Romano's eyes lifted for the first time. "You don't believe? No bodies, sir?" He took the civilians with him. That, finally, made Romano shift in his chair, just slightly, the way a knife shifts on a table when someone brushes the cloth. "Civilians. 3, sir. An old woman, 2 children. One of them was the Moretti boy. The other was a little girl. Granddaughter, we think. They left in his vehicle with him." The room went very quiet. Romano did not move for a long moment. He looked at his folded hands on the table. He looked at the man with the folder. He looked, finally, at the dark window of the basement, behind which there was no view at all. "He took them with him," Romano said softly. "Yes, sir. He could have left them. They were not his." "Yes, sir." Romano sat back in his chair. "Then we have him." The 3 men at the table glanced at one another. None of them spoke. They had all worked for Vincenzo Romano long enough to know that when he sounded almost gentle, that was the moment to be most afraid. "For 10 years, Romano said, I have watched Luca Moretti. I have studied the things he protects. His son, yes. His name, yes. The port, always. But never a stranger. Never a woman he had not known an hour before. Never a child that was not his blood. He let that hang. If he carried these people out of that house instead of leaving them in it, then he has decided they are his. And what a man like Luca decides is his, a man like me can use." He turned his head, slowly, toward the wall. "Find them." The man with the folder lowered it. "Sir, all of them. The boy is too well guarded. He will be inside the safe house by now, and they will not bring him out for any reason. But the girl," his eyes narrowed faintly, "the girl is the key. She is the soft spot. She is what he didn't have to save. That is the one we take." He lifted one finger from the table. A door at the back of the room opened. A woman walked in. She was young, early 30s, no more. She wore a plain dark coat, a modest blouse, low heels. Her hair was pulled back in a soft, professional knot. She carried a slim leather portfolio under one arm. Her face was the face of a kind person, round at the cheeks, open at the eyes, the kind of face strangers trusted on first sight, the kind of face that worked at a children's hospital, or a school, or behind the desk of a quiet office where worried parents came for help. There was nothing about her, looking at her, that suggested she had killed 7 people in 4 different cities. "Sophia," Romano said. "Come here." Sophia Greco crossed the room. She set the portfolio in front of him without a word. He opened it. He turned it to face her. Inside was a photograph clipped to a printed form, an embossed identification card, a worn ledger of false case files dated 3 years back. The name on every page was the same: Sarah Mitchell, New York City Administration for Children's Services. "Background's holding," she said. "It needs to hold tomorrow." "It will." Romano lifted the ID card and held it out to her. She took it. She looked at the photograph of herself with that same small, professional, harmless smile. She lifted the card to the lapel of her coat and clipped it into place. Then she smiled, properly. "For him, I'll find them by morning." Annie woke up in a bed she did not know. For a moment she did not move. The mattress was too soft. The pillow smelled like a stranger's soap. The light coming through the heavy curtain was the wrong shade of gray. There was no rumble of a delivery truck down the block. No clatter of the radiator that had always knocked twice and gone quiet in her old room at home. There was no home. She remembered all at once. The fire, the bear on the chair, the smell of gasoline, her grandmother's hand pulling her down the hallway, the man with the long black coat lifting her into a car. Her chest tightened. She turned her face into the pillow and cried, quietly, the way she had taught herself to cry years ago when she didn't want her grandmother to hear. Her shoulders shook. The brown bear Oliver had given her was on the pillow beside her. She pulled it against her face and held it there until the worst of it passed. When she was finished, she sat up. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand. She slid down off the high bed and went to find her grandmother. The hallway was long and quiet. Sun was just starting to reach the tall windows at the far end. She followed the smell of coffee, which led her past the sitting room and through a set of glass doors that opened onto a covered terrace. Martha was there. She had a mug between her hands and a thick blanket around her shoulders. She was sitting in a wicker chair facing a long garden that Annie had not been able to see in the dark. Across from her, in another chair, sat Luca. He had a mug of his own. His coat was off. He looked like he had not slept. Martha turned the moment Annie's small bare feet hit the stone. "There she is." Annie went straight to her. Martha set the mug down, opened the blanket, and pulled her granddaughter into her lap, as if she still weighed half what she did. Annie pressed her face into Martha's shoulder. "I didn't know where I was," she said. "I know, baby. I know." They sat like that for a while. Luca did not interrupt. He looked out at the garden and gave them the time. When Annie finally lifted her head, Martha spoke quietly, to her and to him both. "Mr. Moretti and I have been talking." "About what, Grandma?" "About what we do next." Martha smoothed her granddaughter's hair. "We can't go home, baby. There's nothing there anymore. But we also can't stay here. Not forever. This isn't our house." Luca did not contradict her. He set his mug down on the low table. "For a few days," he said. "Until the streets settle. Until I know we have not been followed here. Then we will find you somewhere of your own. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I can keep eyes on, without making it a prison." "And then?" Martha asked. "And then you live your life. As close to the one you had as I can give you." Annie looked between them. She did not fully understand. She understood enough. Small running feet sounded behind them. "Annie!" Oliver came through the glass doors in his pajamas, hair sticking up on one side. He stopped at the sight of her on Martha's lap, suddenly shy, then recovered. "They have pancakes. The lady in the kitchen is making them, with strawberries on top. Do you want some?" Annie looked at her grandmother. "Go on," Martha said gently. "I'll be in soon." Annie slid down. Oliver caught her hand at once, with the practiced ease of someone who had done it 100 times instead of one, and tugged her back through the glass doors. The sound of their voices faded down the hall. Luca was watching them go. He did not speak for a long moment. "He has not laughed like that," he said finally, "in months." Martha sipped her coffee. Then she set the mug down and turned her head to look at him directly. "Mr. Moretti, your enemies. Will they stop?" Luca did not look away from the empty doorway where his son had been. "Romano does not stop," he said. "He never has." The garden was very quiet for a moment after that. Then, from somewhere beyond the high stone wall at the front of the property, a bell sounded twice. Luca's head turned at once. A man in a dark suit appeared at the terrace door without being called. "Sir." There is a woman at the gate. Says she is from Child Services. She is asking about a little girl. Luca was on his feet before the man finished speaking. What are her exact words? She has identification, sir. New York City Administration for Children's Services. She says a fire was reported overnight on Claremont Avenue. A neighbor told the responding unit there had been a little girl living in that house. She is here, in her words, for a welfare check. She is asking, by name, for Annie Bennett. Martha stood up slowly behind him. The blanket slipped from her shoulders. By name? She said. She has her name? Yes, ma'am. Luca's jaw set. He looked at Martha, then at the man at the door. Get Marco. Marco was already coming up the terrace path. He had heard. He had the woman's identification card and a clipped folder in his hand, both of which he held out without ceremony. I ran it at the gate. The ID number matches a real employee. Sarah Mitchell, 6 years with the city. Caseload in this borough. Photo on the card matches the woman standing at the curb. Vehicle is a city sedan. Plates are clean. Paperwork has a case number on it. The case number leads back to a real report filed at 4:12 this morning about the fire. And the report named the child? No, boss. The report named the address. She is the one who attached the name to it. She says she found it through school records. Convenient. It's also possible, Marco said carefully. Schools wake up at 6. She could have made the call. Luca was already weighing it. His face did not move much, but Martha had learned by now to read the smallest things. He did not want to let her in. He could not refuse her either. Turning away a credentialed city worker doing a welfare check on a child whose house had burned down would draw exactly the kind of attention he could not afford. The local precinct would be at the gate by lunch. Bring her into the front sitting room, he said. Not this one. 2 guards in the hall. I want a man on the terrace door. The boy stays upstairs. He does not come down for any reason. Yes, boss. Luca turned to Martha. Mrs. Bennett, I'll talk to her, Martha said. If she's real, she'll need to hear from me. If she isn't, I'd rather find out face to face. He held her eyes for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Sophia was shown in 5 minutes later. She came through the door of the front sitting room with the soft, slightly apologetic posture of a woman who knew she was intruding on a difficult morning. Her smile was small, professional, sorry. Her hair was neat. Her coat was buttoned. The plastic identification card with the name Sarah Mitchell was clipped to her lapel exactly where it was supposed to be. Mrs. Bennett, I'm so sorry to be the one knocking on your door today. That's all right, dear. Martha sat. Sophia sat across from her. Luca stood near the window, just inside the room. Marco was at the door. Sophia took in all of it in a single, unhurried glance that did not look like a glance at all. Martha saw it anyway. Window, door, number of bodies, direction. The camera in the corner was pointed. The pause was no longer than a breath. Then her attention came back to Martha, soft and warm. Can you tell me about last night, Mrs. Bennett? Martha told her a careful version. A small one. The fire. Smoke. They had gotten out. A neighbor had helped them. A friend of a friend had offered them a place to rest while they worked out next steps. She did not name Luca. She did not name the house. She kept it close to the truth without giving any piece of it away. Sophie nodded at every right moment. She wrote things down in a leather portfolio. She asked about Annie's age, her school, her general health. She asked if Martha herself was eating. If Martha had any conditions Sophia should be aware of. The questions were almost perfect. That was when Martha first felt it. It was nothing she could have pointed to. The voice was kind. The eyes were attentive. The pen moved at all the right places. But something in the rhythm of it was wrong. Real social workers, in Martha's long experience, were tired. Real social workers had 10 other cases that morning. Real social workers did not sit forward quite that much, did not hold eye contact quite that long, did not smile at quite that exact angle when an old woman mentioned her granddaughter. This woman was paying too much attention. And just one last thing, Sophia said, light as air, in case we need to follow up about housing assistance. Where will you and Annie be staying tonight, ma'am? Martha did not even hesitate. With friends. We're not sure for how long. They've been very generous. Oh, of course. May I have an address? Just for our file. They've asked me not to share it. They have their own children. You understand. Sophia's smile did not change. Her pen paused for 1/2 second over the page. Of course. She wrote nothing. She closed the portfolio. She stood. She thanked Martha for her time. She gave a polite nod to Luca at the window, not a question, not a recognition, simply the kind of professional acknowledgement one civilian gives another in another civilian's home. She let Marco walk her back to the gate. The moment her car cleared the drive, Martha turned to Luca. That woman is not who she says she is. Luca was already lifting his phone. Marco, I want you to call the office that issued that card, not the main line, the supervisor's direct line. Today, right now. He waited. He listened. The room was very, very quiet. When Marco's voice came back through the speaker, it was clipped. Boss. Sarah Mitchell hasn't worked for the city in 6 months. She resigned in March. Personal reasons. Luca lowered the phone. For one single beat, he did not move at all. Then every part of him shifted at once. Move. Now. Everyone. 2 cars. Children in the lead vehicle with Marco. Mrs. Bennett with me. We leave in 4 minutes. The house came alive around them. There was no shouting. There was no running in the halls. There was only a quiet, coordinated reshaping of the morning doors closing in sequence, coats being lifted off hooks, 2 men coming down the staircase with go-bags in each hand. Marco was on his radio before Luca had finished the sentence, redirecting the second vehicle, ordering a sweep of the back service road. Annie was found in the breakfast room with strawberry on her chin. Oliver was beside her. Neither of them understood. Both of them were lifted by the shoulders and walked back through the house with a calm that did not fool either of them. Annie's small hand reached up and caught her grandmother's as they passed in the foyer. Grandma, what's happening? We're moving, baby. Just for a little bit. To where? Somewhere even safer. Martha did not look at her granddaughter as she said it. She did not trust her face. 2 SUVs were already idling on the gravel. Marco took the front seat of the lead one. Oliver and Annie were placed in the back row, with a guard on either side and a third up front. Luca crouched at the open door for a moment, one hand on his son's knee. You stay in the seat. You do not unbuckle. Whatever happens. Do you hear me, Oliver? Yes, Papa. Annie. Same. You do not leave Marco's sight. Annie nodded. Her eyes were very large. She did not cry. He closed the door. He and Martha took the second vehicle. The gates opened. Both SUVs rolled out into the bright, cold morning, one behind the other, and the long drive that had felt like a sanctuary the night before suddenly felt very, very narrow. They made it 8 blocks. The lead vehicle was just clearing a 4-way intersection on a quiet residential stretch when a delivery truck cut hard out of a side street and came to a sideways stop directly across the road. Marco's driver hit the brakes. The lead SUV shuddered, swerved, locked up just short of the truck's side panel. Martha had only enough time to see the truck's rear doors fly open. Men poured out of it. Not 3, not 5, 12, more. They came out fast, and they came out in formation, weapons already up, fanning to both sides of the road before the second SUV had even finished braking. 2 more vehicles roared in from a side street behind them and boxed the rear. Within 4 seconds, the entire intersection belonged to Romano. Contact front, contact rear. Marco's voice on the radio was clipped. Professional. Then it cracked. The first volley shattered the lead SUV's windshield. The driver slumped sideways. The vehicle lurched, climbed the curb, and came to a stop half on the sidewalk. Inside the second car, Luca was already moving, dragging Martha down across the seats, his arm covering the back of her head. The window above them blew inward. Glass rained on his shoulders. Marco, get them out the back. Through the chaos, Martha could see. Only in fragments the rear door of the lead SUV swinging open. A guard pulling Oliver out by the arm, Marco staggering down from the front seat, one hand pressed against his side where the dark coat was already wet through. He took 2 steps. He fired twice. He took another step. His knee buckled. A van, black, square. No markings came around the corner so fast it nearly clipped the curb. It slid to a stop beside the lead SUV. Its side door rolled open. 2 men in masks came out of it. It happened in seconds. Annie was lifted, kicking. Oliver was lifted with her. The guard who had been holding them went down hard from a shot Martha did not see fired. Marco was on his knees by then, trying to bring his weapon up, blood running between his fingers. One of the masked men hit him across the temple with the butt of a rifle. He went down and did not get back up. The van's door rolled shut. The van was already moving. No, Luca was out of the second SUV before the door had finished opening. He fired twice as he came up over the hood. The first man dropped. The second made it inside the van. The van took the corner with its tires screaming, and was gone. Luca ran into the middle of the empty intersection. He stopped. For one long, terrible moment he just stood there, in the middle of the street, his weapon still raised, his coat open, the morning sun catching the side of his face. The van was a black square at the far end of the avenue. Then it turned. Then it was gone. His arm lowered. He dropped to one knee on the asphalt beside Marco. There was blood on his hands almost at once. His mouth moved, not words, not quite. He pressed both palms hard against the wound in his oldest friend's side and held them there. Martha was out of the second SUV now, too. She was running. She did not feel her feet. Luca's head came up. His eyes had gone somewhere very far away and very cold. He stood. When he turned to look down the empty avenue where the van had vanished, he was no longer the father from the hallway. He was no longer the man who had poured her tea. He was something older and harder, something that the city had not seen walk out into daylight in many years. "Get him into the car," he said. His voice was flat, now, then, quieter, almost to himself. He just made the last mistake of his life. The inside of the container smelled of rust and salt water. It was long and narrow and very dark, with one weak bulb strung from a hook in the ceiling that swayed every time the wind moved outside. The walls were ribbed metal. The floor was bare. There was nothing in it except the two children sitting against the far end, and the heavy steel door that had been bolted shut from the outside. Annie's eyes had finally adjusted enough that she could see Oliver's face. He was not crying. He was sitting up very straight against the cold metal wall, his small hands folded in his lap the way someone had taught him long ago, his chin lifted just a little. From the outside, he looked composed. His shoulders were shaking. "Oliver." He didn't answer. "Oliver, look at me." He turned his head slowly. His eyes were wet, but no tears had fallen yet. He was trying very hard not to let them. Annie understood that look. She had spent half her life making that look in the mirror after her mother died. She slid across the floor until their shoulders were touching. She took his hand. His fingers were ice cold. She held on anyway. "My grandma says," she whispered, "when you're scared, you have to count things." "Count things?" "Anything. It doesn't matter what. Your brain can't be scared and count at the same time. She told me that when I was little. You're still little. I'm bigger than you." Her voice almost found a smile. "Count with me. Look up." He looked up. There were thin metal supports running along the ceiling of the container. Ribs of steel. Annie pointed at the first one closest to the door. "1, she whispered. Oliver swallowed. 2, he said. 3, 4, 5. His hand had stopped shaking by 10. By 15, his breathing had slowed. By 20, when there were no more ribs left to count, he was holding on to Annie's fingers instead of crushing them. Outside, footsteps approached. The bolt slid back. The door scraped open. 2 men in dark coats stepped in first and took positions on either side. Behind them, a third figure entered. Slower, taller, walking with the unhurried stride of a man who was already certain of how the rest of the day would go. He stopped a few feet from the children and looked down at them without expression. It was the first time Annie had seen Vincenzo Romano. She did not need to be told. A woman walked in behind him, the woman from the morning, the kind face, the neat hair, the clipboard, Sarah Mitchell. Except she wasn't carrying a clipboard now. She was carrying a pistol, held low against her thigh, the way someone carried a thing they were comfortable using. The soft expression was gone from her face. What had been there in its place all along looked back at Annie now without bothering to hide itself. Annie did not let go of Oliver's hand. Romano studied the two of them for a long moment. "Children," he said. His voice was quiet and oddly polite. "You do not know it yet. But tonight, the two of you are worth more than gold." He turned half a step toward Sophia. "Call him." Sophia drew a phone from her coat. She dialed. She put it on speaker and held it out. It rang once. It did not ring twice. "Romano," Luca's voice, stripped of everything except the name. "Luca." Romano did not raise his voice at all. He did not need to. "I have your son. I also have the little girl. Both of them are alive. Both of them are unharmed. Whether they remain that way is now a matter of your decisions, not mine." Silence on the other end. "There is a simple way out of this," Romano went on. "You will sign over your interests in the Brooklyn port, all of them. The shipping contracts, the unions, the harbor pilots, the men, everything you have spent 12 years building down there. You will do this in writing, in front of my lawyers. By midnight tonight, when the ink is dry, I return the children to you, both of them, intact." The silence stretched. "You have 1 hour to begin moving toward that decision, Luca." Romano's eyes drifted, almost lazily, to Annie. "After that, every hour you wait, I send you something to remind you that I am not a patient man." He nodded once at Sophia. She ended the call. The container went quiet again. Outside, Gulls cried somewhere over the water. Romano started to turn away. "You're scared too." He stopped. It was Annie's voice. Small, steady, not afraid. He turned his head back to her, slowly, as if not certain he had heard her correctly. She was looking right at him. Her chin was up. Her hand was still wrapped around Oliver's. "You're scared," she said again. "I can tell. Grandma says only people who are scared make other people scared first." For a long moment, Vincenzo Romano did not move at all. Then, without answering her, he walked out of the container. Luca did not call Romano back. He stood at the head of the long table in the safe house basement, hands flat on the wood, and looked at the men gathered around him, 18 of them. Some had been with him for 15 years. Some had grown up on the same Brooklyn streets. Marco was there in a chair, shirt cut open, a bandage taped tight across his ribs, one hand resting on the grip of a pistol that the doctor had told him not to lift for at least a week. "We do not negotiate." Luca's voice was level. "We do not sign anything. We do not wait 1 hour. We do not wait 1 minute. He has had my son for 4 hours already. We will not give him 5. No one spoke. "The port warehouses on Pier 19. That is where he took them, confirmed by the dock manager, confirmed by the man we have inside his crew. He thinks he is safe there because the buildings are his. He is wrong. We go tonight. We go at 3. We go, all of us." He looked around the room. "Anyone who wants to stay behind, stay behind. I will not hold it against you. This may not be a fight you walk back out of." Not one chair moved. Marco lifted his head slowly. "Boss, I'm coming. You can barely stand. Then I'll fight sitting down." Luca held his oldest friend's eyes for a long moment. Then he gave a single small nod. From the doorway of the basement, a quiet voice said, "I'm coming too." Every head turned. Martha was standing on the bottom step. Her sweater was creased. Her hair was tied back. She had a small leather bag in one hand. Her face was very, very calm. "Mrs. Bennett," Luca said. "No, that's my granddaughter, Mr. Moretti." "I know. Then you know." He started to answer her, and stopped. He looked at the bag in her hand. He looked at her face. He thought about the woman who had refused his money in a kitchen that no longer existed. He nodded once. "You stay behind me. You do exactly what I tell you. You touch nothing without permission." "I was a nurse for 40 years, Martha said. "I can take instructions." At 3 in the morning, Pier 19 was quiet. Then it wasn't. The first vehicle came through the chain gate without slowing. The gate folded against its grill. The 2 men standing watch barely had time to lift their rifles before they were on the ground. A second SUV followed, then a third, then the rest. They spread across the yard like water finding its shape. The night exploded. Gunfire came from every direction at once, from the rooftops of the warehouses, from the gaps between the stacked containers, from the shadows of the loading cranes. Luca's men answered, the yard filled with muzzle flashes, and the sharp metallic ring of rounds striking steel boxes. Somewhere a fuel drum took a tracer and went up in a column of orange that lit half the dock. Luca was through the first warehouse door before the fire reached the ceiling. Inside it was hotter than it should have been already. Pallets were burning along the back wall. Smoke ran along the rafters in thick black ropes. He moved through it low, his weapon up, calling targets to the man on his left without looking. He dropped 2 men by the office windows. A third came around a stack of crates, and Marco, who could barely stand. Marco, who was bleeding through his bandage, put him down from a sitting position braced against a forklift. "On your right, boss." Got him. They pushed deeper. Behind them, in the smaller side door, Martha came through with 2 of Luca's men flanking her. She kept her head low. She kept her bag close. She did exactly what she had been told. She did not see Sophia until Sophia was already on her. The first guard went down silently. The second turned and was caught across the throat. Then the woman in the kind face stepped over both bodies and walked toward Martha with that same small, polite smile, a knife held loose along her wrist. "You should have stayed in the house, Mrs. Bennett." Martha did not back up. She unzipped the bag with one hand. Sophia came at her in 3 quick strides. Martha shifted half a step, the way she had been taught a long time ago in a hospital corridor, when a patient on PCP had come at her with a broken IV pole. Sophia's knife went past her shoulder. Martha's hand came up. The syringe she had prepared 2 hours before went into the side of Sophia's neck to the plunger. Sophia stopped. Her eyes widened. Her mouth opened. The knife clattered to the floor. 40 years, Martha said quietly. "I know exactly how much." Sophia dropped to her knees, then sideways, and did not move again. Across the warehouse, Luca was almost to the back. A heavy steel container sat in the loading bay, its door bolted. He could see it through the smoke. 2 men were posted in front of it. He took the first with a clean shot at 20 yards. The second tried to fire back, and Marco, from the floor, took him at the same time. Luca reached the door. He smashed the bolt with the butt of his weapon. He pulled it open. Annie and Oliver were against the back wall, exactly where they had been left. Both of them flinched. Both of them looked up. Both of them were alive. "Papa, stay there. Stay there. I am coming back for you. Do not move." He shut the door. He locked it from the outside with his own hand. He turned. The fire had reached the roof now. Burning fabric drifted down through the air like falling leaves. At the far end of the warehouse, framed against the orange glow of a wall of flame, a single figure stood with a pistol held loose at his side, waiting. Vincenzo Romano had not run. He had been waiting for him. The 2 men looked at each other across the burning warehouse. Then they began to walk toward each other. Romano fired first. The shot took a chunk out of a steel beam over Luca's right shoulder. Luca did not flinch. He kept walking. The second shot grazed his arm. He felt the burn of it like a stripe of fire pressed to the skin. He kept walking. He fired once. Romano staggered. The bullet had caught him low on the right side, just under the ribs. The older man tried to bring his weapon back up. Luca closed the distance before he could. He kicked the pistol out of Romano's hand with the side of his foot. It skittered away across the burning concrete and was lost beneath a falling sheet of flame. Romano dropped to one knee. He did not cry out. He did not beg. He looked up at Luca through the smoke with the same narrow, cutting eyes Luca had known across boardrooms and across bodies for 10 long years. Blood ran down the front of his shirt in a slow, even line. "You think saving these kids," he rasped, "makes you different from me? We are the same, Luca. I built a name. You built a name. We sat at the same tables. We buried the same men. You walk out of here tonight and you put on a clean coat and you go right back to being me." Luca stood over him. The fire had reached the ceiling now. A beam groaned somewhere above them. Burning insulation drifted down through the air like black snow. "No," Luca said quietly. He lifted his pistol. "The difference is I'm done." The shot was clean. Vincenzo Romano went down sideways into the concrete and did not move again. 10 years of war ended on the floor of a burning warehouse in a single short crack of sound. Luca stood there a moment longer. Then his knees buckled. He had not noticed the third bullet. It had come somewhere in the middle of the exchange, low, into the belly, just under the buckle of his coat. The pain only arrived now that the fight was finished. He reached down with one hand. It came away black-red in the warehouse light. He sat down hard against an iron support beam. Boss Marco's voice, from somewhere behind him, closer than he had expected, half a sob in the back of it. Marco was dragging himself across the floor on one knee and one elbow, weapon still in hand, refusing to fall the rest of the way down until he reached him. "Container," Luca said. His voice sounded far away. "Get the children. Get them out before the roof goes." "Already going, boss. They're up. They're up." The container door scraped open at the back of the warehouse. 2 of Luca's men were waiting. Annie came out first, lifted under the arms. Oliver was behind her. Neither of them looked at the men carrying them. They were both looking past, into the smoke, at the figure slumped against the steel beam. Annie pulled away. She ran. Annie. She did not stop. Oliver ran after her, 2 small shapes coming through the falling cinders, sliding to their knees beside him on the warehouse floor. Annie reached him first. Her hands grabbed at the lapel of his coat, as if she could hold him up by sheer grip. "Why?" Her voice cracked open in the middle of the word. "Why did you come? Why did you come for me? I'm not yours. I'm not yours." Luca lifted one hand. It was heavier than it had any right to be. He laid it against the side of her face. His thumb brushed the wet on her cheek. "You gave my son," he said. And his voice was not the voice from her doorway anymore, not the voice from the SUV, not the voice that had walked across the warehouse floor at Romano. It was something quieter and very tired. The first real family he ever had. He drew in a breath that hurt. "That makes you mine too, sweetheart." Oliver was crying now without sound. One small hand fisted in his father's coat. Footsteps behind them. Fast. Steady. "Move. Martha, move. Both of you. Let me in." She dropped to her knees beside Luca and did not waste time on anything else. Her hands tore his coat back. Her fingers found the wound. She pressed both palms flat into it with the cold practiced certainty of 40 years of nights like this. "Marco, your belt. Now. And whatever's left of that shirt of yours. Yes, ma'am. Stay with me, Mr. Moretti. You hear me. You stay with me." In the distance, somewhere through the broken windows of the warehouse, The first faint wail of sirens began to rise across the harbor. Closer, closer, the roof groaned again above them. A beam came down somewhere at the far end with a long, slow crash. Sparks rose into the night sky and were carried out over the black water of the bay. In the middle of it all, they sat together on the burning concrete floor, 2 children, one old woman with her hands red to the wrists, and a man who had walked into the warehouse a king and was sitting in it now as something else entirely. All 4 of them were still breathing. 6 months passed. Brooklyn changed seasons twice. The fire on Claremont Avenue became one more story the neighbors told, and then stopped telling. The warehouse at Pier 19 was bulldozed in the spring, the ground salted, the lot sold at auction by a city that did not ask too many questions about who had owned it before. The Moretti name slowly disappeared from places where it had been spoken in low voices for 30 years. Luca did not die in that warehouse. He spent 5 weeks in a private bed, and another 2 months learning how to walk a straight line again. By the time the leaves turned, he had done something no one in his world had ever seen a man like him do. He called his lawyers, his accountants, and the men who had stood with him in the smoke, and he closed it down. The shipping fronts, the protection routes, the cash houses, the corners of the city his family had held by force for 3 generations. Most of it was dissolved. The legitimate businesses, the bakeries, the small construction firms, the trucking company, his grandfather had started before any of the rest of it existed. Those he kept. The rest of the money, more money than most people would see in 10 lifetimes, was quietly moved into trusts and foundations for children's homes across the 5 boroughs. There were people who said he had gone soft. He let them say it. Annie and Martha did not go back to Claremont Avenue. There was nothing to go back to. Luca bought them a small, narrow brownstone on a quiet street in Park Slope, with a yellow door, the way Annie had drawn it once on a piece of paper that had burned with everything else. Martha had argued about the deed for almost a week. In the end, she lost, and only because Luca pointed out, very gently, that the house was already in her name, and there was nothing she could do about it. 2 blocks away, on the same street, was another small house. Slightly older, white trim, a reading chair in the front window. Oliver lived there with his father. Oliver went to school with Annie now. They walked the 4 blocks together every morning, Martha watching from the top of the stoop until they turned the corner. It was the first week of December, the night the snow began. Inside the new house, the radiator hummed in the corner. The radio was on, low, playing something old and warm. Annie was at the kitchen table, exactly where she always was, with a piece of paper in front of her and a fresh box of crayons that Oliver had given her on her 10th birthday. She was drawing. The picture was almost finished. A small house, a yellow door, 4 people standing in front of it, a tall man, a gray-haired woman, 2 children holding hands. There was a knock at the door. Annie did not jump this time. She did not look up at her grandmother for permission. She set down her crayon, slid off her chair, and walked across the kitchen the way someone walks toward a sound they have been waiting for. She opened the door. Snow was drifting past the porch light in slow, fat flakes. Oliver was on the step, scarf pulled up to his nose, a small white bakery box held carefully in both gloved hands. Behind him stood Luca, in a dark coat that no longer looked like a uniform, holding a bunch of winter flowers wrapped in brown paper. Annie smiled. "You don't have to knock anymore," she said. Oliver lowered the scarf. "Grandma Martha says good manners never go out of style." Behind Annie, Martha appeared in the hallway, drying her hands on a dish towel. Luca's eyes found her over the heads of the 2 children. They held there for a moment. There was nothing dramatic in the look, just the quiet recognition of a man who had spent most of his life building walls and had finally found a doorway he was allowed to stand in. Martha smiled. "Come in," she said. "The light's always on for you." They came in. The door closed behind them. The snow kept falling on Brooklyn. "Dear friends, thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. Sometimes the door you open in a storm becomes the door that leads you home. And sometimes family is not the people you are born to. It is the people who run into the fire for you. This story reminds us that real kindness does not check who is standing on the other side of the door before it opens. Annie was 9 years old. She had almost nothing, but she had a warm kitchen and a soft heart, and that was enough to change 3 lives, including the life of a man the city had been afraid of for years. Luca was powerful. He had everything money could buy, but it took a small girl in a small kitchen to show him that an empire is not the same thing as a home, and that protecting a child is not the same thing as being there for one. In a world that often teaches us to be careful, to look away, to keep our doors closed, this story is a quiet reminder that the smallest act of warmth, a bowl of soup, a charged phone, a folded blanket, An unlocked door can be the beginning of a family that no one saw coming. And now we would love to hear from you. How did this story make you feel? Did Annie remind you of someone in your own life? Have you ever opened a door, real or otherwise, for a stranger who turned out to matter? Or has someone once opened a door like that for you? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and your stories often become the heart of what we make next. If this story touched you tonight, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone you love, and subscribe to our channel so you do not miss the next one. Every like, every comment, every share helps these stories reach the people who need to hear them most. We wish you good health, a peaceful mind, and a warm light in your window every single night. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we will see you again in the next story. Goodbye for now.